The entire theater froze. In the center of the stage, a young bald woman trembled with emotion as tears streamed down her cheeks. Suddenly she collapsed into André Rieu's arms, who held her tight and cried with her. The audience couldn't believe what they were seeing. Some screamed, others cried, still others just held their hands over their mouths in shock. And it was in that absolute silence that Rieu did something that seemed impossible for that moment. Something that would forever change how everyone there that night would remember it. 5 days before the concert, Zelda sat in her hospital bed, staring out the window at the grey New York sky. Her father, Jasper, who worked in metalworking, sat beside her bed trying to convince her to stay home. "Zelda, sweetheart, you're too weak. The doctors say—" "Dad, stop," she interrupted, with a voice that was soft but determined. "This is my last chance." Sage, her personal nurse, came in with medication. She had cared for Zelda for the past 3 months and had witnessed her daily struggle against the cancer that had taken over her body. "Tell him, Sage," Zelda pleaded. "Tell him why I have to do this." Sage sighed and sat on the edge of the bed. She was an experienced nurse who had cared for many terminal patients, but Zelda was different. Despite everything she was going through, she kept dreaming. "Jasper," Sage said softly, "I've seen many dying people. Some give up, others fight to the end, but Zelda, she doesn't just want to fight. She wants to live, really live, even if it's just for one moment. But the risk of not living is greater," Zelda said, her voice now stronger. "Dad, I'm 25 years old. I've never stood on a stage. I've never felt what it's like to stand in front of thousands of people and feel that you're really alive." Jasper looked at his daughter, his beautiful, brave daughter who had lost her hair to chemotherapy, but never lost her spirit. He remembered how, as a child, she always danced to André Rieu's music, how she said she wanted to dance with him someday. "The doctor said you might have 2 weeks left," he whispered. "Exactly. 2 weeks to do something meaningful. 2 weeks to make a dream come true." Sage took Zelda's hand. "I've contacted André Rieu's management. They said he's known for his compassion for fans. There's a chance." "A chance?" Jasper looked up hopefully. "A chance that he'll let her come on stage. Not to sing. She's too weak. But just to be there. To feel the moment." Zelda's eyes filled with tears of hope. "Do you really think he would do that?" "I think," Sage said, "there are people in this world who understand what's truly important, and André Rieu is one of those people." That night, Zelda lay awake, staring at the ceiling of her hospital room. She imagined what it would feel like to stand on that stage, the lights on her face, the warmth of thousands of people looking at her, not with pity, but with love and acceptance. She knew her body was giving up. Every day she became weaker, every step cost more energy, but this dream, this one simple dream, gave her the strength to continue. "Mom," she whispered to the photo on her nightstand, a photo of a woman who had died of the same disease 2 years ago. "Help me. Help me be strong enough for this one moment." The next morning, Sage came in with news. "Zelda, I got a phone call. André Rieu wants to meet you before the concert. He wants to talk to you." Zelda began to tremble, not from weakness this time, but from pure emotion. "Really? Really? And there's more. He says if you feel strong enough, if the doctors approve, you can come on stage during the concert." Jasper stood up from his chair. "The doctors will never approve this." "Dad," Zelda said, her voice now full of determination, "the doctors also told me I wouldn't live to see Christmas. That was 6 months ago. Sometimes doctors don't know everything." Sage nodded. "Zelda, I'll go with you. I'll make sure you're safe. We'll take all the medication, all the equipment you need. If it becomes too much, we'll leave immediately." "And if it doesn't become too much?" Zelda asked. "Then," Sage said with a smile, "you'll make your dream come true." The evening of the concert had arrived. Central Park's great lawn was a sea of lights and people. Thousands of fans had come to enjoy André Rieu's music. But for Zelda, it felt like the entire world consisted of only this moment. Sage helped her out of the wheelchair she now needed for longer distances. Zelda wore a soft blue dress that her father had bought. A dress beautiful enough for her big moment, but comfortable enough for her fragile body. "How do you feel?" Sage asked for the 10th time that evening. "Like I'm going to faint from nerves," Zelda admitted honestly, "but also like I'm really alive for the first time in months." Jasper stood beside them, his eyes full of tears he was trying to hold back. He had watched his daughter fight, suffer, hope, and now she was here, about to make her biggest dream come true. "Dad, don't cry," Zelda whispered. "This is a happy day." "I know, sweetheart, I'm just so proud of you." They took their seats in the VIP section, a special spot that André Rieu's team had arranged for them. From here, Zelda could see the stage well, and when the moment came, she could easily walk forward. The concert began with André's usual charisma and joy. The music filled the evening air, and thousands of people sang along to familiar melodies, but Zelda barely heard the music. Her entire attention was focused on the stage, on the moment that would come. Phoenix, who sat a few rows behind them, noticed the young woman staring so intently at the stage. There was something in Zelda's posture, an intensity that went beyond normal fan admiration. "Look at that girl there," she whispered to her husband. "She looks so concentrated." "Maybe she's just a big fan," he replied. But Phoenix kept watching. There was something different about Zelda, something that made her decide to keep her phone ready. She felt that something special was going to happen. On stage, River, the first violinist, saw something unusual in the audience. His experience as a performer had taught him to read the energy of the audience. And there was a spot in the VIP section where that energy was different, more concentrated, more intense. He looked at André, who was in the middle of a waltz, and wondered if his conductor had also noticed. During intermission, André came to Zelda. He had insisted on meeting her personally before making his decision final. "Zelda," he said softly as he knelt beside her, "how do you feel?" "Scared to death and excited at the same time," she answered honestly. André smiled. "That's exactly how you should feel before doing something brave." "Do you really think I can do this?" André looked into her eyes that were weakened by illness, but that burned with zest for life. "Zelda, I've performed my entire life. I've seen thousands of people on stages, and I can tell you that courage doesn't come from strength. It comes from love. Love for what you do, for the moment, for life itself." "I love music so much," she whispered. "It's the only thing that still makes me feel alive." "Then," André said as he took her hand, "let's make you feel alive." The second half of the concert began, and Zelda felt her heartbeat accelerate. She knew her moment was coming. Sage sat next to her, her medical bag within reach in case there were problems. "Are you ready?" Sage whispered. Zelda nodded, though she was trembling all over her body, not from fear, but from anticipation. This was the moment she had dreamed of for months. André announced that there would be a special guest, someone who represented the courage of the human spirit. The audience became curious, looking around to see who that guest could be, and then Zelda stood up. It wasn't easy. Her legs felt weak, her breathing was short. But she stood up, and with Sage on one side and Jasper on the other, she began the long walk to the stage. The audience slowly realized what was happening. Whispers began to spread as people saw the bold, fragile woman walking determinedly forward. "Oh my God," Phoenix murmured as she raised her phone to start filming. "She's going to the stage." River saw her coming and felt his throat tighten. This was no ordinary fan coming on stage. This was someone fighting for every step, every breath. "André," he whispered to his conductor. "Look." André turned and saw Zelda approaching. She moved slowly but determinedly, and on her face was an expression of pure determination. The audience fell silent as they realized what was happening. This was no planned act. This was something real, something raw, something that touched them all on a level deeper than entertainment. Zelda reached the stage just as her legs began to shake from exhaustion. She looked up at André, her eyes full of hope and fear at the same time. "I'm here," she whispered, so softly that only he could hear. "Yes," he replied as he extended his hand to help her. "You're here." Central Park's great lawn slowly fell silent as Zelda continued her way to the stage. What had started as a concert full of joy and music suddenly became something much deeper. A moment of pure humanity that made everyone stop. Jasper walked beside his daughter, his arm ready to catch her if she fell. He could feel how heavy every step was for her, how she was using her last strength to make this dream come true. "You don't have to do this," he whispered one last time. "Yes, I do, Dad," she replied. her breathing heavy but her voice determined. "This is why I'm still alive." Sage followed them with her medical bag, her professional eye constantly checking Zelda's condition. She saw the signs of exhaustion, the pale skin, the irregular breathing. But she also saw something else, a strength that wasn't physical, but all the more real. As they slowly walked forward, the audience began to realize what was really happening. This wasn't a planned act or publicity stunt. This was a real woman, clearly ill, using every ounce of her remaining strength to make a dream come true. "Look at her face," a woman in the third row whispered to her husband. "She's glowing despite everything." "That's the power of a dream," he replied, his own eyes becoming moist. "She's not letting her illness break her spirit." People in the audience began taking out their phones, but not for selfies or social media posts. They realized they were witnessing something rare. A moment of pure human courage that had to be captured. A teenage girl in the audience looked at Zelda and thought about her own dreams that she had given up because they seemed too difficult. "If she can do this," she whispered to her mother, "then I can do anything." An elderly man sitting next to his grandson pointed to Zelda. "Remember this moment," he said softly. "This is what real courage looks like." The audience began to understand what was happening. Thousands of people who had come for entertainment were suddenly confronted with something much more powerful, the strength of a dying woman who refused to give up without making her dream come true. As Zelda continued walking, people spontaneously began creating a path for her. Those sitting in the aisles stood up and stepped aside, not out of discomfort, but out of respect. It was as if they were making a red carpet for her, made of pure human dignity. "Look at that," Phoenix said to her husband as she filmed. "The entire audience is honoring her. They're treating her like royalty." "She is royalty," he replied, "the royalty of courage." In different places in the audience, people began to clap softly. Not the loud applause of a performance, but the soft, respectful clapping of people wanting to encourage courage. The clapping spread slowly through the audience, a wave of support that carried Zelda forward. "They're clapping for me," Zelda said amazed to her father. "They're clapping for your courage, sweetheart," Jasper replied, his own voice broken by emotion. When they got closer to the stage, people could see Zelda's face better. Despite her physical weakness, despite the obvious signs of illness, she radiated something that could only be described as pure life. A young mother picked up her little daughter and pointed to Zelda. "See her, honey? That's how you fight for your dreams." The child, too young to fully understand what was happening, felt the emotion around her. "Why is everyone crying, Mummy?" "Because we're seeing something beautiful," the mother replied. "Something very special." On stage, the orchestra members had stopped playing. They all stood watching as this incredible woman found her way to them. River felt his throat tighten as he saw her approaching. "I've never seen anything like this," he whispered to his colleague violinist next to him. "It's not just courage," the other replied. "It's love, purest love for music." André stood at the edge of the stage, his own emotions warring as he watched. As a performer, he was used to emotional moments, but this was different. This wasn't staged or planned. This was raw, real, unvarnished. He thought about his own career, about all the moments he had stood on stages for thousands of people. But had he ever shown the courage this woman was demonstrating now? Had he ever risked so much for a dream? "Almost there," he encouraged her, his voice soft but clearly audible through the microphones. The steps to the stage seemed endless for Zelda. Each step was a mountain she had to climb. Each movement required more energy than she had, but she kept climbing, driven by a will stronger than her body. "I can do it," she said to herself, but also to the thousands of people watching her. "I can do it." The audience heard her words through the microphones, and a new wave of soft encouragement went through the crowd. "Yes, you can," people called softly. "You're almost there." Sage walked right behind Zelda, ready to intervene if necessary. As an experienced nurse, she had learned to recognize the limits of the human body, but she had also learned to respect the strength of the human spirit. And Zelda's spirit was stronger than her body at this moment. "She's drawing strength from the audience," she noted to Jasper. "Look how she responds to their support." It was true. Every time someone in the audience encouraged her, Zelda seemed to find new energy. It was as if the collective will of thousands of people was pushing her forward. When she reached the top of the stairs, André was there to greet her. The audience held its breath as she took those last few steps to reach him. André looked into her eyes and saw something he recognized. Not just courage, but also gratitude. Gratitude for this moment, for this chance, for all the people who had supported her to get here. "You're here," he said simply. "I'm here," she confirmed, her voice full of wonder, as if she could barely believe it herself. The audience saw the exchange between them, two people who barely knew each other, but who in this moment were connected by something greater than both of them. But then it happened. Her legs began to tremble. Her breathing became irregular, and she felt her strength leaving her. "I feel dizzy," she whispered. André immediately saw what was happening. Without hesitation, he stepped forward and caught her just before she would fall. "I've got you," he said softly, his arms around her as he supported her. The audience saw it all happen. The moment of weakness, André's immediate reaction, the way he caught her as if she were his own daughter. "Oh my God!" someone cried from the audience. "Is she okay?" André held Zelda tightly, her weight almost nothing in his arms. She was so light, so fragile, but her spirit was so strong it amazed him. "I'm sorry," she whispered to him. "I didn't want to—" "Shh," he interrupted her. "You're here. You did it. You're on the stage." Zelda looked around at the orchestra members looking at her with respect and admiration, at the audience watching in breathless silence, at the lights shining on her. This was the moment she had dreamed of for months. "I'm really here," she said amazed. "You're really here," André confirmed. Jasper had climbed onto the stage and now stood next to his daughter, tears streaming down his face. "Zelda, you did it. You're really here." Sage also arrived on stage, her medical equipment ready in case it was needed. But when she looked at Zelda, she saw something remarkable. Despite her physical weakness, she was glowing with joy. The audience didn't know what to do. Was this the moment to applaud, to stay quiet, to leave and give this family their privacy? André made the decision for them. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said into the microphone, his arm still supportively around Zelda, "this is Zelda. She had a dream. A simple dream to stand on a stage and feel music, and tonight she made that dream come true." The applause began softly, respectfully, and slowly grew into a warm wave of love and support that washed over the entire great lawn. "Thank you," Zelda whispered into the microphone, her voice weak but full of emotion. "Thank you all." But André wasn't done yet. He looked at Zelda, then at his orchestra, then at the audience, and made a decision that would change everything. "Zelda," he said, "there's still something we can do." André looked into Zelda's eyes and saw something he recognized. The look of someone who had waited her entire life for this moment. He had seen the same look in the eyes of young musicians stepping onto a big stage for the first time, in the eyes of people making their dreams come true against all odds. "Zelda," he said softly, "what's your favorite song?" "Your version of Ave Maria," she whispered without hesitation. "My mother always played that when she was sick. It gave her peace." André nodded and looked around at the audience, watching in breathless suspense. He realized this wasn't just Zelda's moment. This was a moment that would change everyone present. In all his years of performing, he had learned that the most powerful moments couldn't be planned. They arose spontaneously from real emotion. "River," he called to his first violinist, "come here, bring your violin." River stood up from his orchestra position and walked to the center of the stage, his violin firmly in his hands. He had worked with André for 30 years and had learned to read his moods. But this was different from anything they had ever done together. "Maestro," River whispered as he approached, "what are we going to do?" "We're going to do something we've never done," André replied. "We're not going to play for the audience. We're going to play for one person, for Zelda." The audience became even quieter, if that was possible. Thousands of people held their breath, realizing they were witnessing something extraordinary. This was no longer a concert. This was an intimate moment of human connection that happened to take place in front of thousands of spectators. Phoenix aimed her camera again, her hands trembling with emotion. She had decided to capture everything, not for social media or personal fame, but because she sensed this moment needed to be documented for the world. "This is becoming historic," she whispered to her husband. "I feel it in my bones." André gestured to the other orchestra members. "Come here, everyone. We're making a circle." One by one, the musicians stood up from their positions and came to the center of the stage. The cellist brought his instrument, followed by the flutist, the harpist, and other section leaders. They slowly formed an intimate circle around Zelda, transforming the large stage into something that felt like a living room. "Why are you doing this?" Zelda asked, her voice full of wonder as she looked at the professional musicians surrounding her. "Because," River said, his own voice warm with emotion, "you've reminded us why we became musicians. Not for fame or money, but for moments like this." The harpist, an elegant middle-aged woman named Clara, nodded in agreement. "In my entire career, I've never felt anything like this moment. It's pure." André picked up his violin and looked around at his musicians. "We're going to play Ave Maria, but not like we've ever done before. We're going to play it as if it's a prayer, as if it's the most important performance of our lives." "It is," the cellist mumbled, his own eyes moist with emotion. The audience watched in fascination as this group of world-class musicians transformed from a formal orchestra into something that looked more like a family gathering to honor one of their members. Jasper stood beside his daughter, his heart full of pride and sorrow. He remembered all the times Zelda as a child had dreamed of this moment, of standing on a stage surrounded by musicians, of being part of something more beautiful than herself. "Dad," Zelda whispered to him, "Mom would have found this incredible." "She's here," Jasper replied with certainty. "I can feel her." Sage stood at the edge of the circle, her medical equipment within reach, but momentarily forgotten. She had cared for many terminal patients, had witnessed many final moments, but this was different. This wasn't an ending. This was a climax. André raised his violin and looked at Zelda. "Are you ready?" She nodded, though she still needed support to stand upright. "I'm ready." The first notes of Ave Maria filled the evening air, but it was different from any other version ever played. It was softer, more intimate, full of a reverence that went beyond religious respect. This was human reverence for a compassionate soul. River played the accompanying violin part with a sensitivity he had never shown. Every note was consciously chosen. Every movement of his bow was a tribute to the courage of the woman in their midst. The cellist added deep, rich tones that sounded like the voice of the earth itself, supporting and powerful. The harpist plucked delicate chords that sounded like dewdrops on leaves, pure and vulnerable. But then something unexpected happened. Zelda began to hum softly along with the melody. Her voice was weak, fragile, but there was something pure about it, something that touched everyone who heard it to their soul. "Listen," someone whispered in the audience. "She's singing along." André heard it too and slowed his playing, creating space for her fragile voice. The orchestra followed his lead, their instruments fading until only Zelda's voice remained, weak but beautiful in its humanity. "Ave Maria," she sang, so softly it was almost a whisper. But the microphones picked up every note and carried her voice to every corner of Central Park's great lawn. The audience was now completely silent. No one dared even to breathe for fear of disturbing this magical moment. Here was a dying woman using her last strength to create something beautiful, to share her love of music with thousands of strangers. "Gratia plena," she continued. And though her voice was weak, the emotion behind each word was unmistakable. In the audience, people began to hold each other. Strangers grasped the hands of strangers. Families drew closer together. Everyone felt the need to be physically connected during this moment of emotional intensity. A young mother in the audience held her little daughter and whispered, "Remember this moment, honey. Remember how beautiful people can be." An elderly man stood next to his wife of 50 years and realized how precious every day they had together was. "I love you," he whispered to her, his words inspired by Zelda's courage. On stage itself, the musicians were completely absorbed in the moment. This was no longer their profession. This was their calling. Their reason for existence summarized in this one perfect performance. André felt tears streaming down his cheeks as he played. In all his years of performing, he had experienced many emotional moments. But this was different. This wasn't about entertainment or achievement. This was about the essence of what it meant to be human. Maria, Zelda finished softly, her voice fading into the evening air like a prayer finding its way to heaven. The silence that followed was so complete, it was almost tangible. 10 seconds passed, 20, 30. And then André began to clap softly. Not the enthusiastic applause of a successful performance, but the deep, respectful clapping of someone who had just witnessed something sacred. The orchestra joined him, their applause soft but full of meaning, and slowly, like a wave spreading across the beach, the entire audience stood up. But it wasn't loud applause. It was a standing ovation of reverence, of respect, of love for a woman who had shown what true courage was. "Thank you," Zelda whispered into the microphone. "Thank you all for letting me dream." But André wasn't finished yet. He had one last surprise for her. "Zelda," he said as he took her hand, "there's still something I've never done before." He turned to the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we have all experienced something special. We have seen what true courage is. We have heard what a voice can do when it's fed by love instead of perfection." He paused, searching for the right words. "And so," he continued, "I'm going to do something I've never done in 40 years of performing. I'm going to dedicate this concert to Zelda. Every note we still play tonight, every melody we share will be for her." The audience burst into an applause that was different from all others. Warmer, deeper, full of real emotion. Zelda looked at André through her tears. "Why are you doing this for me?" "Because," he replied, "you reminded me why music exists, not for fame or money or achievement, but for moments like this. Moments where we share our humanity and make each other feel that we're not alone." The orchestra resumed, but this time everything was different. Every note was played not as a performance but as a gift to a woman who had shown what it meant to truly live, even in the face of death. Zelda stood there between André and her father, supported but standing, listening to music being played for her. It felt surreal, like a dream she didn't want to end. "I can't believe this is really happening," she whispered to André. "It's happening," he replied softly, "and it will be part of you forever." In the audience, people were openly crying. This was no longer entertainment. This was an experience that touched their soul, that made them think about their own dreams, their own mortality, their own courage. Phoenix was still filming, but now through a haze of tears. She knew this video would go viral, that millions of people around the world would see what real courage was. "This is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," she whispered to her husband. As the music continued, André began to notice something remarkable. The audience wasn't just quietly listening. They had become active participants in this moment. People began to hum along softly, their voices uniting in a gentle harmony that filled the evening air. "Do you hear that?" River whispered to his colleague violinist. "The entire audience is singing along," the other replied, amazed. "I've never experienced this." It was true. Slowly but surely, thousands of voices began to come together in a soft, respectful accompaniment to the orchestra music. It wasn't loud singing, but something much deeper. A collective prayer, a shared tribute to Zelda's courage. André felt goosebumps all over his body. In 40 years of performing, he had experienced many magical moments, but this surpassed everything. This was no longer a concert. This was a spiritual experience that transformed everyone present. "Zelda," he whispered, "listen, they're all singing for you." Zelda raised her head and listened to the sea of gentle voices around her. Thousands of people who didn't know her, who had only heard her story that evening, were singing for her as if she were family. "Why are they doing that?" she asked, amazed. "Because you made them feel what it means to be human," André replied. "You touched their hearts in a way they'll never forget." Jasper stood next to his daughter and could hardly believe what he was seeing. His little girl, who had always been so shy, now stood at the center of something that could only be described as magical. "Your mum wouldn't believe this," he whispered to Zelda. "She would be so incredibly proud." "I feel her here, Dad," Zelda replied softly. "I feel her standing next to me." Sage stood at the side of the stage, her medical equipment ready in case it was needed. But as she looked at Zelda, she saw something remarkable. Despite her physical weakness, despite the exhaustion she must surely be feeling, Zelda radiated an energy that didn't seem to come from this world. This is a medical miracle, she mumbled to herself. She should be collapsing now, but look at her. She's stronger than I've seen her in months. It was as if Zelda's spirit had temporarily taken over her body, as if her pure willpower was providing her with strength she medically shouldn't have. In the audience, people began not only to sing but also to take out their phones. Not to take selfies or update their social media, but to capture this moment. They realized they were witnessing something historic, something their children and grandchildren should see. "My God," an older man said to his wife, "this is the most beautiful thing I've seen in my 60 years of life." "It feels holy," she replied, "like we're in a church." And that was exactly how it felt. Central Park's great lawn had been transformed from a concert venue into a kind of open-air cathedral, where thousands of people shared a moment of transcendence together. André noticed that even his orchestra members were being swept away by the magic of the moment. Some cried while they played, others smiled through their tears, all deeply moved by what they were experiencing. "Maestro," River whispered during a brief pause in his part. "This is why we became musicians." André nodded, too emotional to speak. He had searched his entire life for moments like this, moments where music showed its true power, where it broke down barriers and connected people at the deepest level. As the music continued, Zelda began to waver. The adrenaline that had carried her to this point began to fade, and her body reminded her how sick she really was. Sage saw the signs immediately and came forward. "Zelda, we need to let you sit." But Zelda shook her head, determined not to let this moment end. "A little longer. Please let me feel a little longer what it's like to really live." André felt how she became heavier against his arm and realized this beautiful moment was almost over. But instead of sadness, he felt deep gratitude. Gratitude that he had been allowed to be part of something so pure, so real. "Zelda," he said softly, "look around you. Look at what you've achieved." She looked out over the audience and saw something incredible. People weren't just standing and listening. They had their arms around each other. Strangers were embracing each other. Families were crying together. Everyone was connected by the moment Zelda had created. "Did I do this?" she asked, amazed. "You reminded us all what love is," André replied, "what courage is, what it means to truly live." At that moment, Zelda made a decision that would amaze everyone. She took the microphone from André, her voice still weak but determined. "I want to tell you something," she said, and immediately the entire great lawn fell silent to listen to her. "When I was little," she began, her words slow but clear, "I dreamed of standing on a stage and making people happy with music, but life took a different turn. I got sick, I was scared, and I thought my dreams were over." She paused to breathe, and thousands of people hung on her words. "But tonight you taught me something. You taught me that dreams don't die when our bodies die. They live on in the hearts of people who love us." A wave of emotion went through the audience. People cried openly at her words. "I'm going to leave you soon," she continued, her voice now stronger through the power of her conviction. "My body is giving up, but my dream, our dream of tonight, that will live forever." André felt tears streaming down his cheeks as he listened to this incredible young woman who, in her darkest hour, was giving light to thousands of others. "So I ask you this," Zelda said, now speaking directly to every person in the audience. "Go home tonight and cherish your dreams, never give them up, because if I, a sick woman who can barely stand, can make my dream come true, then you can too." The applause that followed was different from anything Central Park's great lawn had ever heard. It wasn't loud or boisterous. It was deep, respectful, full of love and admiration for a woman who was using her last strength to inspire others. Jasper came forward and embraced his daughter tightly. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart. You're the strongest person I know." "I'm not strong, Dad," she whispered. "I'm just someone who refuses to give up without trying." André took the microphone again, his own emotions now fully visible. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice broken by tears, "you have witnessed a miracle tonight. Not a medical miracle, but a miracle of the human spirit. Zelda has shown us all what's possible when we refuse to give up our dreams." He looked at Zelda, who was now clearly exhausted, but still glowing with satisfaction. "And so," André continued. We end tonight not with music, but with silence. Silence to reflect on what we've seen, to honor what Zelda has meant to all of us. He put down his violin, and the orchestra followed suit. The entire great lawn fell silent. Not the silence of an ended concert, but the silence of a prayer, of a moment so sacred that words would fall short. Zelda sat in her chair, surrounded by André, her father, and the orchestra members who had come to her. She looked out over the sea of silence, over thousands of people who had accepted her, supported her, loved her. Some dreams are stronger than time, André finally said into the microphone, his words echoing over the silent square. The audience nodded in silence, many still crying, all touched by what they had experienced. Slowly people began to leave Central Park's great lawn, but it was a different kind of departure than after a regular concert. People talked softly with each other, shared their emotions, discussed what they had seen. This hadn't been entertainment. This had been a life experience. Phoenix walked past Zelda on her way out and stopped briefly. "Thank you," she said simply. "Thank you for showing us what real courage is." Zelda smiled weakly. "Thank you for letting me dream." An hour later, when the great lawn was empty, Zelda, Jasper, André, and Sage sat together on the stage. Zelda was now in her wheelchair, exhausted but glowing with satisfaction. "How do you feel?" André asked. "Complete," Zelda replied without hesitation. "For the first time in my life, I feel complete." "You did something incredible tonight," he said. "You taught us all something about living, about courage, about what's truly important." Jasper took his daughter's hand. "Your mum would have been so proud." "I think she was here," Zelda whispered. "I felt her with me on the stage." 3 weeks later, Zelda passed away peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by family and friends. Her last words were, "I can still hear the music." Phoenix's video of that evening was viewed more than 50 million times worldwide. It became a symbol of courage, of making dreams come true against all odds, of the power of the human spirit. André Rieu established the Zelda Foundation, dedicated to fulfilling last wishes for terminal patients who dream of music. The motto, "Some dreams are stronger than time." And every concert since then, André begins with a moment of silence. Not for himself, but in memory of a young woman who taught him that the most beautiful music doesn't always come from instruments, but from hearts that refuse to give up their dreams. On Zelda's gravestone is a simple inscription: "She sang, she dreamed, she lived." But for everyone who was at Central Park's great lawn that evening, it meant much more. It meant that dreams have no expiration date. It meant that courage can be greater than illness. It meant that sometimes the shortest lives leave the deepest impression. The music ended that evening at Central Park's great lawn. But that moment of pure human courage and love, will never end. It lives on in the hearts of everyone who experienced it, a reminder of what's possible when we refuse to give up our dreams.